Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SavvyCast. This is Jamie, and I'm grateful to all of you joining, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast. Today's episode is one that covers several serious topics. My guest will share years of sexual abuse at the hands of a widely respected leader in his church, spiral into deep addiction, his rejection of his faith, and his embrace of atheism. I will be talking today with my friend, Andrew Ryan. He's a friend of both Zane's and mine. His story is one that I do hope you will listen to from beginning to end. But first, let me tell you just a bit about Andrew and his business life and his personal life. Andrew has a prolific history of helping Fortune 500 companies obtain product market leadership through his keen understanding of emerging technologies, data-driven insights, and digital transformation processes. Andrew is married to his lovely bride, Hillary. They have 4 children, ages 3 to 11. Andrew enjoys tinkering with old cars and vintage electronics, and he is also a master of cooking with smoke and fire. So I'm so thrilled today to welcome to the SavvyCast my friend, Andrew Ryan. Andrew, thank you so much for being on the SavvyCast. I'm so glad you're here today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Andrew, I always ask as the first question of all of my guests, what would you choose as your last meal?
It's hard. Probably have to go with black coffee, like really good, like Kona coffee out of Hawaii, and
Okay.
like lamb chops or some sort of meat, some big meaty dish in front of me.
Okay, well, I do want to, before we get into our big deep conversation, want to point out to everyone, you're a very active leader at our church, at our particular campus, and you serve your small groups by cooking on you've got the big green egg. How many devices do you have where you're cooking with smoke and fire? It's a lot.
Yeah, my back deck is about 7 different smokers of some sort. I like kitchen gadgets. I like gadgets in general, as you can probably tell. And so it's pretty fun to, my small groups are, we eat really good food, we smoke meat, and then we watch TV. I mean, it's just my speed, right? Like,
I just want to know when we're going to get to
hiking.
join. We just want to be
come
the
on.
small group.
There's no physical exertion needed, right? Just eat some food. We're going to watch a little TV and talk about it, right? So
hey, that's fellowship and community. That's what it's all about. But okay, well, Andrew, I just want to, I guess, delve into how this podcast episode came about and why I invited you on. My husband's known you longer than I have, and he's told me what a strong leader you are and what a fabulous businessman you are. But then the other day, I got to hear just in the hall of the church or in the foyer, you started sharing a little bit of what you're going to share today with our viewers and listeners. And I stopped you probably after about 2 minutes of what you were sharing. And I said, I have got to have you share your story, because not only are you an overcomer, but wow, you have so much to offer that I know is going to touch someone watching or listening, and who knows how many. So first of all, let's just start from the beginning, where you are from, and we'll go from there. You're from my neck of the woods. I just will say, for those who don't know, I'm a North Alabama born and raised girl. Probably you've never heard of where I'm from, Moulton, Alabama, but Andrew is from about 45 minutes from Moulton North. Is that right?
Yep. So I grew up in Muscle Shoals. Actually, so it's called the Quad Cities. So it's Tuscumbia, Muscle Shoals, Sheffield, and Florence.
Right.
All there together on the Tennessee River. And we lived in Tuscumbia. I went to school in Muscle Shoals and went to church in Sheffield. I was born in Florence, right? So you don't really know when you go from one city to the next up there. It's just cross the railroad tracks, right? So grew up there. And then at 18, I received a scholarship to move to Birmingham, to the big city, and go to college. And I was so amazed that you could come to Birmingham and you could get food in the middle of the night. Like that was to me like
Yeah.
the biggest thing. Like Purple Onions open at midnight. This is incredible. And
Yeah.
so I moved to Birmingham and went to Birmingham Southern College here in town. Met my wife there. Rest is kind of history, right? So we met and now have 4 kids. So.
And your children are beautiful. I think I mentioned them in the intro. Your golden doodles are beautiful. You've got a beautiful family. Okay, so Andrew, you were born and raised in Muscle Shoals and North Alabama. And I don't know if it's still that way. I'm 54. I haven't been back there in a while. Is a very, what I would call fundamental conservative part of the heart of Dixie. I mean, there's a church on every corner. I grew up Church of Christ. What did you grow up? Southern Baptist?
Methodist.
Methodist. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your spiritual formation?
Sure. Yeah. So I have 3 older brothers, and they're all attorneys. So I was the quiet one in my family, and went more into the software side of things. We grew up. My grandfather, who passed away before I was born, was a traveling preacher, and so Baptist, revivalist type preacher. And then my mother's family was very heavily Methodist, and so I grew up in the Methodist church. I don't know if fundamental is the right word, but definitely pretty strict. And that's where a lot of my story really originates. Is my family, we were very involved in that church there in Sheffield. And my parents' best friend was the youth director / music minister of that church for 50 plus years. This was like the people they go out to dinner with and all that kind of stuff. And when I was very young, he started to abuse me as a child.
How old were you when that started?
Probably 10 or 11 years old.
Wow. Okay.
Until I was basically a teenager, and it was obviously a very well kept secret for a long time. And that's really what kind of put me down a really, really dark path, especially when I got to college and discovered alcohol and really just kind of dove in there to escape from the past abuse and not being able to tell anybody and all that kind of stuff. This was a very trusted member of our community, right? Like, he was literally like considered a saint around that area, right? He'd been leading these youth groups and these trips and mission trips and all that kind of stuff for so long, and everybody trusted their kids with this guy. And then when I finally did come forward in my late 20s, the Sheffield police in the newspaper from up there, right, actually said, we've had over 50 phone calls of people saying, yeah, you've got the right guy, right? Like, this happened to me when in the 70s, right? Like, this happened to me anyway. So this had been going on a long time, and I kind of hit a point with the alcohol and everything else late in my 20s that I said, hey, it's time to come clean. And it was after a lot of this had been in the news a lot with other like Penn State and other places where this was happening, and I just felt the need to take it to the ABI, and they did the rest and put him in prison. So.
Wow. Okay. So Andrew, on many levels, this is so complex and it's so disturbing. So you have someone who is working with youth and going on trips. And so you start at this formative age, you're being abused, sexually molested. Did you have any idea that it was happening to other people? Because obviously you did not say anything at the time.
No.
You had no idea until you were gone. Did you ever consider sharing this with anyone? Why did you not share it?
Yeah, I mean, so the only people I ever shared with, I shared with my wife before we were married, right? And I guess we were probably still dating. We dated a long time, like 5 years, right? So we were probably still dating and maybe even engaged when I shared it with her. But the reason why is there's a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, like maybe I should have done something different, or should I have fought back harder, right? Like, what should I have done different to make sure, why did this happen to me? Why did it? And really it perverted my sense of God and church, of course, right? And the biggest thing that I got stuck on was, how could a loving God let this happen in his house? right? And that's where my life took a very dark turn, right? And I didn't understand that it's not about God letting or God causing something to happen, that evil exists in this world, and the only way to overcome that is through him, right? And that's where I was broken. That's where my theology broke. That's where my faith broke, and that's what broke me as a person, really. And it took a long time before I got over that.
So, in your younger years and when you were at home and going through this, how was your spiritual view? Did it start? Was it still? Were you trying to hold that together? How did he? And we hear so many stories of people just like you who were groomed, who were taken advantage of, and many times the perpetrator uses threats or they use guilt. Was this person using that with you, or how was he keeping you quiet?
I mean, I think he relied on the shame and the guilt, right?
Mhm.
To keep those people quiet. But I also know in talking to other people, in the past 15 years, that one of the tactics used was he would ask you to tell him secrets, and then he would keep those. He would be like, you have to keep this a secret. I'm gonna tell your parents this. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just a really sorry person. Just a bad way
Mm.
to a bad person to do those types of things, or maybe he was a good person that was overtaken by the enemy. I don't know. That was one of his main tactics, was to get you to share private information that he could then hold over you. So
Mhm. Okay, for parents who might be listening and they have children who are active in a youth group, what would you tell them might be warning signs that they need to look for if their child is really active? And would you say that this would apply to male and female leaders, or do you think this is more prevalent with males?
I mean, I'm surely biased, right? But I definitely think it's more prevalent with males. But we still see things in the papers, a lot
Yeah.
recently of it, that it seems to be affecting everybody.
Mhm.
The things to watch out for. So, but I tell my kids, I have 4 kids, right?
Mhm.
And my oldest is 11. She's about to be 12. She's involved in the youth group there at Highlands at Grandview. And the number one thing is I tell her is if an adult tells you to keep a secret, that is a secret you never keep. Right. If an adult other than your mother or father tells you to not tell anybody else something, then you should immediately come tell us that. Right. Like
Amen.
that is the key signal that it's something you shouldn't
Wow.
keep a secret.
Wow. And that's probably something every abuser says, this is our secret. Do you did you exhibit in hindsight, now that you're once this came out and your parents knew, I know you were older and there so much time had passed, did they start putting things together and seeing things that they didn't see while that was going on?
Yeah, I definitely think they they kick themselves still today, right? And there was no way they could have known, right? It wasn't their fault at all.
Mhm.
In any way, shape, or form. This guy fooled everybody for like 50, 60 years. So like they can't feel good. Anyway, there were definitely like changes in my grades. I was the lead cipher on our math team, and I brought home an F the first 6 weeks after this started, right? Because
Mm.
I didn't want to do anymore. I didn't want to do it anymore.
Mhm.
And it's stuff like that was pretty obvious. I didn't have any like major behavioral issues, right? I wasn't getting suspended or sent to the principal's
Mhm.
office, stuff like that. But it was really like once college hit and I got out of the house, when my behavior really started to change, and a lot of binge drinking, a lot of sexual immorality, just doing
Mhm.
doing whatever I wanted to do to escape,
Mhm.
whatever escape I could get, I was going to take.
Mhm.
And so it became an everyday thing for me to drink as much as I could and not have to think about this.
Mhm.
And that's also when I kind of became a quote unquote active atheist, and
Mhm.
would actively tell people, hey, you can't believe that stuff, right?
Mhm.
It can't be real. And that was, now looking back, they can kind of see, oh yeah, that's what put him down that path, right?
So,
So,
because I want to dig really deep into that side of your story, but can you, because another fascinating element to this is the timing of how he was brought to justice. Can you explain the timeline and how many others came out, and then the statute of limitations and how that worked?
sure. The timing would have been, gosh, about 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago. So about 9 or 10 years ago is when I came forward and started working with the ABI. I spent like my whole 20s are just lost to me, right? Like just, and so the Penn State stuff came out. I'm talking to my brother over Thanksgiving while I'm home, and we're running to the grocery store for last minute stuff, and he's talking about how crazy that whole situation is. And I said, well,
Well, can you remind people the Penn State, and I can't even remember, was it Sandusky?
yeah,
Okay,
Sandusky,
he
he's
had,
still in prison, right? So he
right, and
abused dozens and dozens of boys at the facilities there at Penn State. And
right,
the big to do outside of that was that Paterno apparently knew about it,
yeah,
and just gave him a slap on the wrist and said, "Don't do it anymore." I don't know if any of that's true. I'm not trying to sully Paterno's
sure,
name or
but
anything like that, but that had been in the news a lot, and my brother mentions it to me in the car, and I said, hey, our local guy here, he's not much better. He's not a saint. He's done stuff like that too. And the response was, how dare you say that about him? You can't ever say stuff like that about him. He is a saint, and I can't believe you would say that, right? And I was like, oh, okay, I'll
this
shut
is
my
your
mouth.
brother.
Yeah, this is one of my brothers, and then it was a year later, a full calendar year, and he came back to me. He calls me. He says, "Hey, what you said at Thanksgiving? Were you serious? Is that real?" I said, "Absolutely." I said, "Of course it's real. Well, I would never say something like that. But was it true?" And that's when he said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm ashamed. I should have believed you." And he made it his personal vendetta at that point, right? Nobody, it's one thing for you to beat up your brother, but when somebody else does it, you better watch out, right? And
So,
and he went all out.
so when you made the first statement, it was at Thanksgiving in front of your family. Did you just imply that that person was a perpetrator, or did you tell them he had actually abused you?
Yeah, I said, he's not a saint, and he actually abused me as a child, and that's when I was told, hey, shut your mouth. We don't talk about, you don't say that kind of stuff about him, right? Like, how dare you, really? And so that to me, like as a victim, and to hear that, and I don't really think of myself as a victim, but at the same time, that's the language we use. So anyway,
Mhm,
to be told when I do speak up, to be told no, shut up,
mhm.
keep quiet. That was kind of your greatest fear coming true, right? Like, oh, nobody's going to believe you. Exactly what the kind of stuff that guy would say to me, when I was a kid,
Wow.
was nobody would believe you anyway if you tried to tell somebody this.
At
So,
that point, Andrew, was he still best friends with your family, and was he still active in the church at that point?
oh yeah, absolutely. So it was really the about a year later from that, when he was getting ready to retire from the church, and the church was going to throw a big celebration, and they were going to name a building after the guy and all that kind of stuff. And that's really what kind of triggered I think my brother to come back to me and ask me again, like, hey, was that real, or were you just blowing off steam? Like, what was that? And that's when I told him, yeah, it's real. And he immediately went to my other brothers and my father, and they got a group, a posse together, basically, with torches and pitchforks, and
Mhm.
went and wrote a letter, demanded his removal from the position. And then that's when a lot of stuff started to come out, right? We found out that he had been removed from his youth ministry position by the North Alabama Conference like 15 years prior, because of other abuse claims. But he was left in his ministry, music ministry position. And I have a lot of thoughts about the North Alabama Conference, and I'll save those for another day.
Well, now I'm not familiar with the Methodist Church. Church of Christ was always autonomous. Each Church of Christ did its own thing, didn't answer to a board or whatever. But just in a nutshell, is that a body that is supposed to protect the other Methodist churches in that region, but they failed to do that? They just slapped his hand and just moved him into music ministry, which you're also working with children, aren't you, or young people?
So the way it
Wow.
works, to the best of my recollection here, right, is, there's Methodist churches worldwide, the United Methodist Church, right, and then in their governorship, if you will, is the Council of Bishops. There's the president of the Council of Bishops, and one of my professors at Birmingham Southern at one point was the president of the Council of Bishops, which is the Pope of the Methodist Church worldwide, which is super cool. And I love that Bishop Morgan so much. Such an incredible person.
Mm-hmm.
But the North Alabama Conference, basically all the churches, Shelby County north of Birmingham, are North Alabama Conference churches. And this is their governorship. There's a bishop in charge. They place the pastors. So in the Methodist Church, you're assigned usually like 3-year, 7-year runs, to go be the pastor at this church, and then they'll move people around. And that's generally how it works. The conference is responsible for punishment and removing people from positions. And there was someone actually that I know his kids were my age growing up, and he was the one that had reported it to a counselor who contacted the conference, and then the conference just said, hey, we're just gonna move him into a different role, and did not protect anybody with that, right? So like I said, I have a lot of thoughts about the cowardice of the past bishops and leadership of the North Alabama Conference. And cowardice is the very best word I have to describe their actions, especially when the ABI tried to interview them for this court case.
All right. I just want to wrap my brain around this. So your brothers, just before he was about to have the building named, the celebration for his retirement, there had not been anyone step forward. They just came to you, remembering your comment prior the Thanksgiving, and they just said, okay, now were you really telling the truth? So that they were just prompted to clarify that. Nobody had come forward at that point.
Right.
Wow. Okay. And you again said, yes, this happened. And then they're all 3 attorneys. So they hit the ground running, and your parents were on board as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did things unfold? I know that this was a very big deal. It was in the papers everywhere. I mean, there may be older people listening who know exactly who and what we're talking about, but can you just sort of tell us how things snowballed and what happened? Just give a recap.
Yeah, sure. So my brothers and a couple of other senior people at the church, I think it was the principal of the Sheffield High School included, and they jumped in and they wrote a letter. They hand delivered it to the board of the church and said, hey, we know for a fact this stuff happened. You've got to remove this guy. They did at that point remove him, right? Sheffield police, local police, got involved and asked people to come forward. They started receiving phone calls. There's a load of stories in the Times Daily with quotes of the police chief and the head of detectives about all of these different events. And that's when in one of those articles is where he said, 50 plus calls about this, right?
Now, what year was this, Andrew, that this all came down?
Like 2013, 2014, somewhere in there.
Okay.
About 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago. Is when it was on AL.com and all that stuff as well, right?
Now, was he protesting and denying this all the while, or what was he doing? I mean, everybody's coming out, calls, police. What's he saying? What's he doing?
He went to his trailer in the woods, literally, and hardly left. His wife divorced him, and he never denied it. In fact, when it did finally go in front of a judge, he accepted a plea and actually said in open court that, he did it. So, it was at least he didn't put me through that, right? So I'll give him credit there, right? But
how many people actually, in the end, how many people had he abused? Roughly, I know there were a lot.
The total count that we could ever get to, and it's not like we're collecting baseball cards here, but
Sure.
probably 50 or 60. It we do have stories from as early as the 1960s of people that were abused in the 1960s with this guy. So he was a Boy Scout leader. He was
Oh my
a
goodness.
troop leader. He was a youth leader. I mean, he just that's the thing, right? The predators go where the prey are. So you always have to keep that in mind when you're trying to protect your children,
Was
right?
it
So
all males that he abused? Were they all male?
yeah.
Okay. So this, a lot of time had passed and you have all these people coming forward. Tell us about the statute of limitations and how that worked out, because that's mind blowing to me.
Yeah, so I mean, there were a lot of people saying, "Hey, this happened," but in the state of Alabama, there's you only have so long to report these types of crimes.
Mhm.
You'll see here recently where you're seeing crimes from 40, 50, 60 years ago now being prosecuted because, like, I think the state of New York has removed that requirement and opened up the statute for a period of time for people to go back and make claims, if you will. However, out of all those people that he abused, there were very few people that were willing to truly come forward and go on the record.
Mhm.
Again, a lot of guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And then out of the people who were willing to come forward and talk about it, and be willing to press charges, to be willing to testify in open court, all that kind of stuff, right? I was the only one that fell within the statute of limitations that could actually press the charges.
How
And so
close were you to the expiration of the statute? I don't even know what
I was still a few
Alabama's,
years off.
just a few years. I don't even know what our statute of limitations is.
I hate
Wow.
to not know,
Wow.
but I think it's something like 15 years.
Okay.
And so the other one of the other people that had very strong claims, right, and was very passionate about seeing this guy go to prison, he was outside of that statute of limitations. He was 15 years older than I am. So it really came down to, and I hit this point where it's like, okay, he's out of his position. He's been disrespected in the community, if you will,
Mhm.
right? Like nobody's gonna let this guy around their kids anymore. So that problem is solved,
Mhm.
right? So do I really have to go for, take it the next step and go forward? And I sat on that, and I sat on it for months and didn't press the charges with the ABI, and look, my brothers, nobody was pressuring me to do it. But I started seeing my family coming apart, like my parents just constantly upset. This was eating at them. There was no real closure for them. And I just finally got to the point. I said, you know what? I don't care. Let's go. Let's do it. Right. My biggest concern was I just had my first kid. She was, I don't know, maybe 2. And my biggest concern was her growing up and reading about her dad in the papers. Right. And like searching my name when she gets older. And so my only request was just keep my name out of the papers. Now the older I'm getting and the wiser, I guess, I'm getting, I don't care. No, put my name on the billboard, right?
You're a hero. And everyone listening, especially anyone who's gone through this, you're a hero and you're brave and courageous, because the cowards, I mean, it's cowardly not to expose pure evil. Because Andrew, do you not agree? Yeah, he did go to the trailer in the woods, but had he not, and you can tell how this ends, do you really think that he's going to stay in the trailer in the woods and not go abuse? Because once an abuser, pretty much, mostly, they're always an abuser. So do you not agree?
Oh, I completely agree. I think that was part of what triggered me too to take it to the next step is when my brother said he saw this guy at the local park feeding the
Oh my
ducks,
goodness.
and they just looked at each other, right? And so he's sitting out here with his retirement, with his pension, excuse me, from the church, and feeding the ducks in the park, watching the kids play, right? And I'm over here in living hell, right? I'm over here in a drunken stupor all the time because I can't bring myself to look at myself in the mirror, And so that's when I just got so frustrated. And I said, okay, let's do it. I went and met with the ABI, which is Alabama Bureau of Investigation, who was looking at bringing in the FBI as well, because a lot of this happened across state lines. So he would travel, take me on trips with youth groups, or have me as a teenage chaperone of the junior high groups and take me to Atlanta or whatever, right? And that's where this kind of stuff would take place. And so anyway, because across state lines, it becomes federal. And point is, they press charges. Of course, I'm deposed a few times and provide statements, and then there's corroborating statements, so on and so forth. And he pleads it out and says, "Yeah, I did this, and I shouldn't have." And I think what he quoted, if I can remember the quote, was something of, "I guess the devil just got a hold of me." And I'm like, man, the devil got a hold of you for 60 years. Like, that's
Wow.
quite a hold.
Wow. So when this all came out and he was eventually convicted, how old was he?
He was in his early 80s.
Oh, wow. Okay. So tell us how it ended for him. And then I want to get into your story.
They sent him in prison. He went to, I can't remember exactly so Marshall County. I can't remember, but basically prison for the infirm. So it's not like a federal max security, right? But he was there for a couple of years, and then they released him because he was in such bad health, and then he passed away, and that was it. It was kind of the end. So
What were your did he ever say he was sorry? What was your last conversation with him, or do you even recall? Like during the court proceedings, did you ever? Never.
no, I mean, I'll be honest with you, he didn't even look at me, right? So I think the cowardice is probably the right. I know I was very nervous to see him again, and then when I did, and he's on a cane and he's very frail, it's amazing. I'm a big guy. I'm probably 6'4" and a couple 100 pounds, and this little old man, right? But I was so scared still as a grown man, and that's the kind of power that type of abuse can put in place, and it's so hard to break those chains. But once those chains are broken, I mean, and that's where Jesus is the key, right? Is the blood of Jesus can break any bond, and that's what changed my life and turned it around.
Well,
and have
and
no
that's
fear today, right?
right. Well, and that's what I'm so excited to finish this with on such a positive, hopeful note. But I do want to ask where you are today. Now, it was a long road getting to the point of joy and leadership and hope and beautiful family and successful career. You went through a lot, and I want you to touch on that. But the others, have you seen the outcome of some of the others? And has it been like yours, or has there been more just despair left in the wake of all of this?
It's a mixed bag. It's definitely a mixed bag. So there are some that getting that closure and seeing him go to prison was what they needed, and seeing him removed from his post, if you will. There are others that just haven't been so lucky. They're quite frankly, there's some that didn't make it. They killed themselves with alcohol, with guns, with it. That's the suicide rate especially for males, sexual abuse survivors is very high, and it's my goal was more of like a slow suicide, right? Is escapism through alcohol, and that's the way I went for so long until I could finally process this and have healing.
So you basically became you became an alcoholic. You were telling us that day how much you drank, and it was mind blowing. What did your life look like?
Yeah, so I was still, you're gonna laugh, I was still fairly high functioning in my career. I was a good software engineer, and I could write good code. But when the bell rang, right, at 6 p.m. or what have you, I would be at the bar and be there till midnight every night. I didn't really drink at home. I didn't really like going home. I wanted to be out and away, and I wanted to be blacked out by the end of it, right? Was the goal. Was a lot of, I mean, when I say a lot of alcohol, I mean, at 37 38 years old, I had to have both my hips replaced because I literally killed them with the amount of alcohol. It caused necrosis in my hips.
Okay, and you did share that at church that day, and that's mind blowing because that you were drinking the equivalent of what would you say? And you were drinking hard liquor and things that would probably kill a lot of people. Yeah, I mean,
oh yeah. Yeah, so I mean, 20 drinks a night pretty easily. If a fifth of scotch would be an easy night, and gin, scotch, whatever I could get my hands on, really. And I didn't care as long as it would make me not have to think about where I was, what I'd been through. It was 100% escapism. I'm kind of lucky that I never really got into anything harder than alcohol. because
Right.
that would have ended very, very violently, most likely.
What was happening at home, and how is this affecting your home life at this point?
Yeah, I think my poor bride was pretty frustrated. She knew why I was doing it. You know, I've
Mhm.
been honest with her. But it's, and look, I was always faithful to her, right? Like that was not a place where I struggled. She put up with it is probably the best way to put it. I don't want to say condoned it, but she also didn't necessarily condemn it as strongly as you would probably expect.
Now, at this point, y'all do not, did she go to church? You're still, and you became an atheist when? In college? That's when you totally lost your faith, or you shut the door on your faith and you became an avowed atheist. I mean, you were open about it. And tell us what you would tell people in bars.
Oh yeah, I mean, either on the internet
Or,
or in
yeah.
sitting in a bar, right? Like how foolish you would be to believe this, right? I would say stuff like, "Oh, it's Santa Claus for grown-ups," right? Like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you're lucky you get to believe in the fairy tales because when I die, it's just black." You know, like
Mhm.
I would talk about people's wishful thinking and all that kind of stuff, and you know, everybody thinks that they're right and everybody's wrong, and I'm the only one who's right. I mean,
Mhm.
I was just generally a huge ass.
So you were very militant because basically, do you feel like you, not intentionally, but you had a disdain for anyone of faith because you saw such hypocrisy, and on the part of others, a lot of ignorance, and even in some cases, a lot of just glossing over of horrible things
Yeah,
that were being done. So
yeah.
therefore, that anger was really directed toward people of faith.
It was directed towards the leaders, especially, right? The
Right.
quote unquote leaders,
Mhm.
especially the North Alabama Conference, right? Like I just had so much disappointment, just so much disappointment of the people that take their faith so seriously that they're going to dedicate their lives, that this is their career, right? And for them to be cowards is so disappointing. Like, please don't be a coward. Be anything but a coward when it
Mhm.
comes to this kind of stuff, right? Stand up for the people that need to be stood up for. Don't protect the people. Don't protect the abusers. That's what had me so frustrated and so willing to talk openly in a bar to anyone who would listen, about how foolish they are for giving these people your money, right? That was a lot of what I would harp on, was how can you
Mhm.
give these people your money? You know, give it to the World Wildlife Federation, give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's where I was for a long time.
So y'all didn't go to church at all. What happened? Tell us what happened, and how there is a unbelievable God thing that happened and brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I convinced my wife over many years to believe the way I believed. And I don't know that she was ever fully convinced, but convinced enough to not, you know, push for us to go to church or what have you.
Was she
Uh,
raised in any kind of Christian home?
yeah, she went to a Methodist church in Montgomery called Fraser, which is
Oh, oh yeah. I'm very familiar.
a
In
great,
fact,
great church. Yeah.
yeah, and John Ed Matheson is one of the finest people. I mean, I
He married us, so I'm with you.
oh, did he? John Ed's, I saw him, Zane and I went to Zane was an honoree at an ACA game, and John Ed was there, and we talked. He's an amazing man. He's getting older, of course, but amazing man. So she was raised at Fraser, which it was a wonderful church, but yet you had convinced her to believe, hey, this really, it's not. So was she as an atheist, or just sort of not really?
Probably agnostic,
Okay. Yeah.
probably. You know, a lot of times she would go out of town and visit her parents on the weekends, and I would stay back and take that as an opportunity to go to the bar, right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
I went out one Saturday night, stayed out super late, and that Sunday morning, I woke up just with an absolute, like, a demand on my person to get up and get showered and find a church. And I have no idea why. Zero idea why. And I had never been to, well, I hadn't been to hardly any churches in Birmingham other than a couple while I was in college, right? And I knew I didn't want to go back to any of those. I knew I couldn't go back to a Methodist church. And so I chose one that I'd been invited to a few times, but never been. And I mean, I can't imagine what those poor greeters smelled when I walked through the door that Sunday morning, because it was just straight booze.
And you're by yourself. Everyone's out of town.
Yeah, it's just me. And I went to River Chase, Highlands, Church of the Highlands there in Hoover, which was the closest one to my house. I've been invited to Highlands for like Christmas stuff over the years. And I said, no, we don't do that. But I think that those invitations are what kind of stuck in my head. And the people that I knew that had invited me, I knew were good people and smart people that I went to college with or what have you. Yeah. So I went in, I sat and went through worship. And I think it was the second song of worship. I never heard it before in my life, was Love on the Line that Hillsong wrote. And that, like, it something changed, something hit me. It was odd. It was something I had never experienced in my life. So really, like, my spiritual development and formation just got so stunted at that young age, right? As you're kind of turning from a kid into a real human being, right? And so, like, I missed that whole development that a lot of people have in their teenage years, because it just got turned off, basically. And that in that moment, I think I got to experience in just 5 or 10 minutes what a lot of people experience over a long time.
Would you say the Holy Spirit totally filled your person?
Because
it was supernatural.
It was, I as an adult, I'd maybe cried 2 or 3 times, right? And I was just standing there by myself with tears pouring down my face. I have no idea why I'm in this room, why I'm in this building, why I'm at this church. I've never heard this song before. And all of a sudden it's just like, boom, everything just, walls came down, chains got broken. I didn't do anything. I didn't say any magic words, right? Like, it wasn't the message that day. It was the Holy Spirit was there in that moment. After the service, I'm walking out through the lobby. I see the campus pastor. He sees me. We've never seen each other before.
Was it Matt at the time?
Yeah, it was Matt Miner. Made a beeline towards me, asked me my name, and I just said, "Hey, I just need you to pray for me. I don't know what's going on, but I need prayer." And he just, right there, middle of 100 people or 200 people, just put hands on me and started praying. And again, it was supernatural. It's not just like the hairs on the back of your neck standing up, right? It was like a whitewash of my spirit. It was incredible. So here's the craziest thing about all of this, right? Is I had been having 20 drinks a night for 15 years, something like that. And from that moment, I haven't had a single one, right? Not one since that Sunday morning, 6 years ago.
Did you go through any sort of withdrawal or any sort of negative effects?
I mean, the desire had been removed. There may have been some physical withdrawal, like night sweats and stuff like that for a week or two, but I still had zero desire to have a drink.
And you didn't have to go to any sort of rehab meeting, nothing. You stopped cold turkey after 20 years of probably some of the heaviest drinking I've ever heard of.
Yeah. So like I went to a few AA meetings, but I realized very quickly I didn't need it, because everybody, and look, AA is a fantastic program. And I've got people that are very close to me that are leaders in AA, and that's exactly what some people need. Some people need those steps and need that regimen. And it is a daily battle for them. And for them, my heart goes out to them, because I can't imagine how hard that is. It was not a daily battle for me. It was binary. The switch was flipped off. And there's only one way to flip a switch like that off in your brain, and that is the Holy Spirit, right? Like that's not like a choice you make. So
as I'm sitting here listening to you, and I wonder if you agree with this, it looks, or it seems to me, as if God gave you one of the greatest gifts, a gift that so many people would love to have, is instantaneous. Well, a Damascus Road experience, where Paul went from being like an ISIS figure to the most ardent follower of Jesus. You had something like that, but then he took away that thorn, or that what could have crippled you or continued plaguing you while you tried to grow in your faith, but he just removed it all. So you were totally brand new.
I didn't even know what to do after that. Like, what do I do with all this time and peace? Like, that was that was the best part of the whole thing, is I had an immediate peace about all of the past, all the history, right? I was able to not only know alcohol, but no anxiety meds, nothing like that. I didn't need anything. Now there are still consequences to our actions, right? I still had to have my hips replaced a few years later, right?
Mhm.
Like there's still
Sure.
lingering effects of that, right? But as far as the desire was just instantaneous, just gone.
Okay. So what happens now? You're a brand new person over a period of what, an hour and 15 minutes. When you walked in and you walked out, you're totally different. What what happens? I mean, how did everything unfold after that?
Yeah, so I didn't tell my wife.
Oh, you didn't.
No,
Okay,
I hid it.
why?
I don't know if I was embarrassed or what. I've been screaming this message for so long, and then to like completely change teams, right? That's like being an
Wow.
Auburn fan your whole life and becoming an Alabama. You can't.
Yeah.
So I I snuck
Wow.
around for 6 months going to church on Sunday mornings. I would tell her I was going to the office, but I'd go to church instead.
Mars, that's amazing.
So
Did
yeah, that
did Matt and some of the other people not ask, about her, and what did you say?
they were really good. They're careful to
Yeah.
not pry when you don't want them to. And every once in a while somebody say, "Oh, are you married?" Or yeah, I am. Like
The stars.
she's a heathen, but
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. So when did you tell her? After how long?
so yeah, it had been about 6 months, and then one I guess it was a Saturday night. I said, "Hey, what do you think about going to church tomorrow?" And she said, "Okay, yeah, sure. That's surprising to hear from you." I said, "Yeah, I think I want to go try Church of the Highlands." And she was so excited because she had a friend who had been inviting us forever, and we had been saying no, but she adores this friend of hers, and she texted her, said, "Hey, can we come with you?" And she said, "Yeah, sure, of course." So we went and met her, and the rest is kind of history.
Was it a different campus, or did y'all go where you had been going?
So we went to River Chase for a while. We really loved Matt, of course, as the campus pastor. In fact, we loved him so much, our fourth child is named after him.
Oh my
So
good, Matt's amazing.
he,
We love him.
he saved my whole family, right, myself included. So
Wow.
we
So
got a lot for him.
how quickly did she go all in and love the Lord? And it was her transformation. Of course, it wasn't as dramatic because she was not living the life that you were, but her heart, how long did it take for her to fall in love with Jesus again and with church and wanting to live that life?
I mean, it was probably a month or two for her, right? Like
Wow.
from mumbling along to songs to hands up and let's go. you know so it was a pretty quick change as well.
Okay. And then, so now describe your family now. First of all, they're all beautiful. Y'all are one of the prettiest families I've ever seen. You're hugely successful. Y'all are leading in church. What do you think every day, like when you pray or just when you're in your quiet moments, you must have some amazing talks with God. Wow. Whew.
I
I mean,
mean,
I could get choked up just thinking. I mean, I haven't heard many stories like this.
I'll say I think I have an advantage, quite frankly, an unfair advantage over folks who haven't been through that kind of trauma and who haven't lived the life that I lived. Because once you've been in that ditch and once you've watched your life kind of crumble around you, to come out of it, the amount of gratitude that you have is incredible. That is probably, that's where I spend most of my time. Is I've heard, I can't remember which pastor said this or writer, but that the secret password to God's presence is thank you. And I think that's the truth, right? And just having gratitude, whatever your situation may be. And that's where I spend a lot of my time and concentration, is at that part of the tabernacle, if you will, right? Is in thanks and in worship. That's where I feel the most connected. And that's my entry to the secret place, is gratitude and worship. Some people it's theology or reading ancient Hebrew. That's not where I'm at. So
Do you, because of your story, and I know it may not be because I had no idea until you shared it. Have you had people who have suffered the same kind of horror that you went through come to you and say, "Can you help? What do I do? I'm in despair." And how have you been able to help anyone?
Yeah, I'd say more around alcohol than
Mhm.
sexual abuse, right? That's a little easier to talk about, a little more well
Yeah.
known, and there's just not many men that want to go and talk publicly about other stuff like that, right? So, but definitely around the alcohol and helping people. I still will go to a couple of bars in town that I used to frequent. That, when I say frequent, I mean I knew the bartender's kids, like that kind of frequent,
Yeah.
right? And I'll still go there on a Saturday night and drink a soda water or a Diet Coke and just wait for opportunities, right?
Wow.
To either give rides or share the gospel. And that's been a lot of fun. And I've had some pretty great success there with people that I meet on a Saturday night or at church with me on Sundays. So that's pretty fun.
So you have a heart for others that some may not have because you've been where you see where they are and you are there and you want to do what you can.
Yeah.
And
I'm not
Andrew,
talking about the people who are out at a bachelorette party, right?
oh yeah, yeah,
I'm talking about the guys who the light is out of their eyes,
yeah.
right? That are in true despair and are in the ditch. Those are the people that, I want to reach a hand in and try to see if I can help pull them out.
Andrew, have you forgiven not only the perpetrator but all of those who could have helped and did not? Have you forgiven them all?
Ah, that's a hard one. So the perpetrator, yes. And that there was an incredible amount of freedom that came from that. And it was actually as a part of a freedom group that I went through a few years ago through small groups at church. And that forgiveness lesson and finally just saying, you know what, it's not on me to hold this grudge. I'm going to forgive. Forgiving somebody is actually setting a prisoner free and then realizing that you were the prisoner, right? And that was an incredible experience to kind of break free from that. I haven't really thought about the others. I guess I probably still have some sour feelings towards some of the leadership that I probably now. Thank you, Jamie. I'll go address that next.
Well,
So,
no, and the reason I'm saying that is because I'm an 8 on the Enneagram for those who might understand that personality. And one of my big things is justice. And justice has not been served completely in this situation and in many people's situations like this, especially when leaders do not protect the innocent. And when someone's whole spiritual formation can be totally ruined. You are probably the exception that you are now such a strong spiritual leader, in spite of what you've been through. But to me, I mean, justice has not been done. So it would be hard. That's why I asked. It would be hard for me. I would really have to say, Lord, help me forgive. Help me forgive. And I think there would be a lot of confrontation that would have to happen for me to get to that point. Because I'm sure I know the perpetrator has gone. Did you ever get to tell him he was gone by the time he had passed away by the time you had forgiven him, right?
yeah. Mhm.
But there are still those who are alive. But thankfully, they're probably not in positions of the leadership positions they were in. Correct.
Yeah, a lot of them have retired and moved on, and I I haven't really thought about the need to forgive them, but now that you bring it up, maybe there is a need.
Well, and forgiving doesn't mean that they don't need to be brought to justice or that they don't need to be removed from whatever. And the time frame on your story is quite remarkable. But what would you say as we wrap this up? Because I know you've got other meetings. First, what would you say to anyone out there listening who is being abused by someone in a position of spiritual leadership? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, you got to break free. It it's amazing what standing up to your bully or to your abuser can do. And my first thing would be to try to stay out of the situation however you can. But if you can't, then to be very direct and say, I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. I don't. We're not doing this. Like, leave me alone. I would also say you've got to have a parent or someone that you can trust, that you can talk to. And, this is not acceptable from anybody in any realm of society, at the highest levels, at the lowest levels, any kind of leadership position, or it's not acceptable. And I promise you, your parents won't accept it either. Yeah. So it's number one, it's got to stop. And a lot of times the best way to do that is to be very direct with the perpetrator and just say, hey, no more, I'm not doing this.
But then also immediately tell someone. And if someone doesn't listen, would you say find someone who does? Just keep trying, because they've got to be stopped.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, right? They've got to be stopped. It's not always just about the individual, it's about all the other potential abuse that can happen, so if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for everybody else too.
And then what would you say, Andrew, to those who have experienced, for lack of a better term, church hurt or spiritual abuse, who have lost their faith because of one or a small handful of people who abused them in the name of Jesus? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's so hard. But we live in a fallen world. This is the enemy's realm, and there are spiritual forces, whether you believe it or not, right? Doesn't change the fact that they're there. There's real evil in this world, and there are people that do evil things, and there are people that do evil things in the name of good, in the name of God, but that doesn't mean that that's truly God. And again, you have to separate the evil and evil actions from the goodness of God, and those are two very, very different things. As long as there's a way for predators to gain power, they're going to use whatever they can to do it. And a lot of times it's churches, a lot of times it's schools, and a lot of times it's hospitals. It's all kinds of places where they can gain power. And that doesn't mean that God caused it or allows it, right? But you have to separate the two.
Right. And then the last question, I promise. What would you say to someone who is wrapped up in addiction, who is drinking nightly like you were, and they believe they're never going to be able to stop, or that they couldn't enjoy life without that? What would you say, without alcohol? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I was with them. I remember a thought process of what would I do at a party without alcohol? Like how would I have fun, right? How would I ever enjoy a concert or anything? And what's amazing is when your senses stop being dulled, the amount of enjoyment is like tenfold. It's like, going to a Christmas party at a friend's house and like actually having a conversation with somebody and shaking hands and giving hugs and like you feel things again that you didn't know you could feel. And that is way better than the tranquilized state of addiction. The other thing I'd say is, the groups are fantastic. If you don't know where to get started, just keep going to a group. You go to a group every day, and that will help you get started. Find one that's close to home and that's easy to get to. A lot of them have 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. meetings every day if you need to do it before work. And take it one day at a time, right? Every day your head hits the pillow without booze in it, then that's a win.
Amazing.
But nothing for me personally, there's power in words. There's absolute power in the names of Jesus and in the things he's done. And I'm telling you from my personal experience in a couple of different situations with people struggling with addiction, when I have called on the name of Jesus and the blood specifically of Jesus and pouring out the blood of Jesus on that addiction and on that situation, I've watched chains get broken on people that swore that they could never be broken. There's my golden nugget for the day is there's power in those words. There really is.
Well, Andrew, I cannot thank you enough. And I know everyone who hears this or watches this is going to be impacted. And there are no telling how many people whose lives are going to be dramatically changed because of your vulnerability, your willingness to share. Thank you. You are an amazing person. You have an amazing family. And Zane and I are blessed to know you. Thank you. Thank you for being on today.
Thank you, Jane.